Today is a continuation of my last video where I spent some time to show you how to build a project management app from scratch. So if you haven't checked that out already, please do so you can follow along easier in this video. But today I'm going to show you how to add a filter, and not only a filter, but like a nice modern, fully responsive pop-up that's going to allow you to filter through your tasks and through some of your projects so you can better manage all the workflow that's going through this app. So you can sit back and either watch through some of my thought process in building something like this, or if you want to actually build it yourself, you'll be able to follow along step by step to add this to your very own app. So I hope you like it, and let's start building. So first, let's go ahead and go into our tasks page, and I'm thinking of putting the filter icon and like a little bit of text here in the corner. And as the app resizes, it's just going to sort of shift along here. So what we're going to have to do, because the label is not in a container and I want to keep it all in the same row, I'm going to actually insert a container here. So let's do a horizontal container, and we're going to change its flexible height to off, and we're going to set it to whatever this was, which is 40. So let's go ahead and put this as 40, and I'm going to move it up. I use command and square bracket or left square bracket. It's going to move it up, and I'm going to then also remove the border radius, so make it 0. Drop shadow will be none, and minimum width I'm also going to set to 0. And so I'm going to take this label and I'm going to command X, control X, whatever it is, and I'm going to do command V and paste it within this container. So this is fine as it is here. And so next up, I'm going to create a button. I'm going to insert a button within this container, and I'm going to place it sort of in the corner here, and it's going to just say filter, and that's going to be what we're going to use to trigger our filter pop-up, which we're going to create in a little bit. So yeah, within this container, I'm going to insert another button, and we're going to go ahead and click that. There it is. And we're going to make some adjustments to it. First, let's just call it filter, and we're going to change its height to stretch, and we're going to do minimum height of 0. And flexible width, I will turn off, and maybe let's set this to 100. So that should be good. What size did we use for this font? It was Lato Black 14. So let's maybe keep that consistent, and let's go ahead and change the font to Lato Black 14. And so we're going to change its color properties. So for the font, so I'm going to go ahead and select the color, and I'm going to use my theme dot gray. That might be pretty good. And I'm also going to change the background color, or the background fill, to transparent. And I'm also going to set this container to this setting right here, which is space between. So it's going to always create space between these items. So this is always going to be on the right hand side. This will always be on the left. And so that's looking pretty good. However, I do want to also update some of its fill properties around the hover functions. So if I hold Option or Alt, you can see it, it's doing some changing of the color of our font and the fill as well. So I'm going to go ahead and update some of those properties. So let's go ahead and search for the hover, and the hover color. I want it to be our theme. So my theme dot primary. So if we hover over it, it's going to change to our purple. And the hover fill, I'm going to also change to transparent, because I don't want the background to change. I only want the text to change when we hover over it. So that's pretty good. And I think one more setting that we need to do is when we click, you can see there's also a fill background, and on the color of the font is also changing. So we're going to search for the pressed settings, and the pressed color I'm going to set to, maybe let's do a, it's going to be a version of our primary color, but let's do color fade, and it's going to be my theme. Or actually, in this case, we've already referenced it in our color property, so we're going to do self.color, and let's do minus 20%. So it's going to be 20% darker than our actually self.hover color. It's going to be 20% darker than our hover color when we click on it. So let's just preview this. And if we go here, it's our primary, we click, it's going to be darker, although we can't really see it too well because there's still the pressed fill. Pressed fill I'm going to also set to transparent. There you go. So now if we preview, we hover, it's our primary color, we click, it's a little bit darker. But we can also see there's a pressed border fill. So we want to get rid of that as well. So we're going to go here and we're going to do pressed and then pressed border color. We're going to set to transparent. But actually what we can also even do is just turn off border in general because we don't really need for it. So there you go. And there you go. So it's not functional right now. We haven't set up its onSelect property. We still need to create our component, which we will do. But you can see if I turn into like a phone, it's going to shift that filter down the page and it's always going to live on the top right corner here. So that's looking pretty good. And on select of this button, let's go to advanced and go to the on select. So I'm actually just going to set the variable now. It's going to be set var pop-up filter and it's going to set to true. So it's not going to do anything right now, but once we set up our component, it will it will function properly. So that's pretty much it for our filter button here. It's on our page. We're going to eventually do this for the project, but first let's go ahead and finish the tasks and then we can move over to the projects later in the video. So let's go ahead and create our component for our pop-up where we're going to add some of the filter properties. And so if you go to the components, we can do a new component and let's continue our naming convention and just use pop-up. Let's say filter task. So this is going to be specifically for the task. We're going to create a different one for the project because they will have some slight differences, although they will be quite similar. But once we build this one out, it'll be very easy to build out the one for projects because there's only going to be some slight adjustments that we're going to have to make. So yeah, pop-up filter task. Let's go ahead and our display, make sure turn access app scope on. This will allow variables to flow in and out of the app and your component. And so next up, we're gonna start to create our pop-up. So we're gonna insert another container, and this one will be a vertical container. And we're gonna create some formulas here. But first, we'll keep the justify vertical at the start. We're gonna align in the center. We're gonna leave gap. We're gonna keep all of that. The X property, we're going to do something where it's going to automatically center it. No matter the screen size, it's always going to keep it in the middle. So we're going to go into the X property and we're going to put in this formula. It's going to be parent.width minus self.width divided by 2. So it's always going to be in the middle there. And a similar one for the height property, or the Y property, it's going to be parent.height minus self.height divided by 2. So it's always going to live in the center there, no matter the dimensions. Now for the actual dimensions, so the width and height, for the width, I want to make it dynamic and responsive. So we're going to do the minimum of the app width times 95% or 400. So right now it's going to be 400, but as the app size shrinks, it's going to shrink with it and leave some space, basically 2.5% on each end here, because it's times the 95%. So that's going to be the dynamic and responsive width. And for height, we're going to do something similar, just some different numbers here, which is going to be the app height times 95% or 700. So right now it's 700, but as the size of the app shrinks down, it'll maintain the app height, but give some space up top and on the bottom. And for the border radius, let's increase that to 10, and the drop shadow, let's also increase that and make it a little more bold. So it'll pop out the page much better. And then the color, I'm also going to set it to white so that it pops out of the page as well. And so there's our blank canvas where we can now start to add some buttons and some fields to be able to filter our app once we put it onto our screens. So first thing, within this container, I just want to create a bit of a header. So I'm going to insert a text label, and let's make it say filter, and let's make it Lato black, and let's just keep it at 13 is fine. We're gonna keep it to the left there. We're gonna do a bit of padding. It's gonna be 20 on the left, and the width I'm actually gonna set to stretch. Yeah, we're gonna set it to stretch. We're gonna set the minimum to 0, and we're going to set the height. Maybe let's increase that to 50. And for the color, I'm going to set that as our primary color. So my theme.primary, and the background for the fill. So let's just search for the fill property here. Instead of transparent, we can make it my theme.light gray. And then we have a little rectangle that we can insert to sort of create a bit of a separation. So right now you'll see that it's just a color against color, but it'll be nice to just add a little bit of a breaking point between the title and the actual contents. So let's go ahead and insert a rectangle. And we've done this in some of the previous pop-ups here, so you can also just copy and paste those. For example, the top header, we've already created that, so you could copy and paste it. I'll just recreate it again just for reference. But yeah, this rectangle, it is gonna live inside of the container actually. So I'm gonna put it right in here. So let's just go ahead and insert a rectangle again. There you go. So it's going to live there, and it's going to be right after our label. But we're going to make some adjustments here. So width, we're going to set it to stretch with a minimum of 0. The height, we're going to set it to 1. So it's going to be very minimal. We'll keep border as off. And we're going to set the fill, or I guess the color, to a custom color here. So 220, 220, 221. So you'll notice it's very minor, it's very slight, but you will see it right there. One thing you do want to do, you'll notice that if you hold the Option or Alt key and you hover over it, it does have some hover effect. So we don't want that. So make sure you select it, and let's change its display mode to disabled. So it'll still show the same color, but if you hold your Option or Alt key, it's not going to have that hover effect. So that's looking pretty good. What we can do next is within this container, we're going to add another container, and it's going to be where all our content is going to live. So let's do container, another vertical container. I do want it to take up the height of our app, so I'm going to keep flexible height on, but I will say minimum height to 0 for now. And we'll just keep it all left justify, left align. Gap, I'm going to set to 20, so that's going to create some separation between all of our actual filters. And padding, I'm going to set the top to 20 and bottom to 20. Left, I'll set it to 40, and right, I'll set it to 40. So that's going to give us some white space around here so that it's not all the way to the edge. And you'll see once we start to build those out how that is going to look. And minimum width, I'm going to set to 0. We'll keep it flexible or stretch width. And we're just going to remove the border radius and the drop shadow. And so we're going to build these out sort of by little blocks of containers. And hopefully once we build out a few, we can just sort of duplicate and copy and paste sort of thing. So let's do another container. And let's say I want to do a filter from the start date. So the time that the time that the task started, the start date, I want to filter dates between. So a start date and an end date. So let's go ahead and create that. We'll do a vertical container, and we're going to set its properties here. We're going to keep it at stretch, but the minimum width will be 0. We're going to turn off flexible height, and let's make these maybe 70. So that's how tall they'll be. We're going to put some like a label here. We're going to have our date selections here, and we're also going to have a little clear button so that you can click and remove the selections that you may have made in the past. I'm also gonna remove the border and remove the border radius and the drop shadow as well. And so as I mentioned, we want like a label here. So we want to know what this filter is going to be doing. And we also want a little clear button here. So what we're going to do is create another container to house those up top. So let's go ahead and insert that. And it's going to be a horizontal one. And we're going to change it up here. So we're going to do space between. So it's gonna, one of them is going to be, our label is going to be on the left and our clear button is going to be on the right. Similar to how we did the filter page on the previous screen. And then minimum width, I'm going to set to 0. I'm going to turn off flexible height and I'm going to set it to 30. So that's sort of the space that it's going to take up for us. And I'm going to remove the border radius and remove the drop shadow. All right, so then now we can insert our text label and we're going to set the text label to start date. And I'm gonna put that as Lato black, or actually let's just do Lato. Let's not make it too bold. And we're gonna make it size 12, just a bit smaller. I am going to adjust the height. I'm gonna make it to stretch with a minimum width of 0. And I'm also going to do flexible width. I'm gonna turn it on with a minimum of 0. And then for the color, I want to change it to our gray from our theme. So we're going to do my theme.gray. There it is. And I'm going to also, instead of recreating that whole button again, we can go back to our screen and let's maybe steal this. Let's copy this and go back to our component. And within this container, let's paste that in. And we're just going to change it up a little bit. So instead of filter, it's going to say clear. And I also want to not make it so bold. Let's make it Lato and let's make it match with the font size 12. So it'll match that. And maybe the color, let's do it primary. So it's always going to be purple. If you hover over it, that's fine. It'll remain purple. And when you click on it, it gets a little bit darker. But we've got to make sure our onSelect property, we're going to set it to false for now. And I'll come back to adding some functionality on this one. And we're going to also, I want it to align to the right. So we're going to do the text alignment on the right. And I also want to just remove the font weight. Yeah, let's make it normal. So it all matches with the titles. And so now we're going to go back to this container here, which is containing all of this. And we're going to insert another container because we're going to have two date pickers side by side. It's going to be a start date and an end date, and it's going to act as an in-between reference for our start date. So I'm going to change it up here. So minimum width will be 0. It will be, we'll maintain the stretch functionality. Flexible height I will keep, but I'm just going to set it to 0 as the minimum. And I'm going to remove border radius and drop shadow. And I'm also going to give a gap of 20. So it's going to create some space between the two dates. And so we could, within this container, start inserting our date pickers from here. But I don't want to redesign it again. We've already done that in the previous video. So I'm just going to go to my task form. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And we're going to go back to our component, select that latest container that we created, and we're going to paste that in. And I'm going to get rid of some of the errors here. So the default date is parent.default. I'm actually going to just reset it and set it to blank. And there's another error, tooltip. I'm just going to delete that. And there's another error for border colors. I'm just going to remove this condition here because we're not doing like a submit form or anything. So I'm not going to have any error issues, but I am going to set it to the light gray color. So for our border. Now, one thing that happens, it's hard to see here, but it kind of cuts off the border at the bottom just because the border adds some height to our date picker. So what we want to do is actually go back to this container and add some padding. So from the top, bottom, left and right, I want to add 2 padding on each of them. And so that's going to include the thickness of our border on our date pickers. So I'm also going to set its flexible height to stretch with a minimum of 0. And there you go. So it's perfectly aligned and you can see the border with no problems. One thing I do want to update, which I probably should have done in the last video, but I want to change the way that this looks. I don't want the default thing to say December 31st, 2001. That doesn't really make too much sense. So what I'm gonna go do is in the advanced, and we're gonna look at the format. So instead of the short date, I'm also going to set it to YYYY-MM-DD and put that all in quotations. So it's gonna take less space, and it's not gonna cut off if the filter is a little bit smaller. I'm also going to set its the input text placeholder. So instead of that 2001, I'm just gonna set it to double quotes, and within that, let's just say that that's going to be the start date. So that's good. I do want to set the flexible width on and minimum width to 0. So right now it's going to take the full width of our bar, but I'm actually now going to copy this and paste it in. And you can see it creates another one. And because we have the flexible width, it's taking up 50% of the portion. And remember, we added a 20 gap on our container here. So it's going to give some separation automatically. So that's really nice. What we can do here is just change this from start to end. And it's good practice, especially in this case, to name these properly so that you can reference them easier, especially with these clear buttons that we're adding, and eventually a reset button where it's going to reset all of them. So it's going to be a little bit easier for us to reference. So we're going to do DT for date, and we'll just call it start date start. And we can do similar here. So DT start date end. So that's going to be much clearer for us to label, because here what we can do on the onSelect property, I mentioned I would come back to this, is do a reset. So we're going to reset DT start date start, and we're also going to reset DT start date end. And so what that's going to reset it to is whatever we put in here, which is our default date, and it's blank in this case. So if I'm just holding the option key here, let's say we set it to today, let's say we set this to today or tomorrow, and we clear, it's gonna reset all of those. For the next one, let's go ahead and do the same thing, except it's gonna be for the end date, or the due date actually, I should say. So we're gonna copy this whole container here that contains all of this, because we don't need to recreate everything. We can just copy. Let's be efficient. Select this top container, which is this whole thing here, and we're gonna paste it in. And again, because that container has a gap of, I believe we set it to 20. What did we set it to? Yeah, we set it to 20, so it's gonna create some nice spacing in between here. And so yeah, this way we can just rename this. We can say due date, and again, we can keep it to start and end, but this time I'm gonna rename it properly. So it's gonna be the due date, and it's gonna be the start of that. And I'm also going to change this to due date end. Good thing about this is automatically going to update, because it's sort of referencing, it knows to reference those two date pickers. So we don't need to change anything here. It will automatically adjust if we clear it. So our dates are done. That's looking pretty nice. Maybe we can move on to the title. So again, I'm gonna copy one of these, and we're gonna select this main container. We're gonna paste that in again, and let's do title, right? So the task title, we wanna be able to search it although I am going to delete these because it's no longer a date. It's going to be a text input. So I'm going to just delete these for now, and we're going to see how we do this here. So let's go to the screens because I don't want to recreate it again. I have done it right here in the title. So I'm just going to copy this and go back to our component into this little container, and we're going to paste that in. We're going to fix the errors. So the default, I'm going to set it to blank. So similarly how we did to the start dates. There's another error here, the tooltip, I'm just going to delete that. And there's another error, the max length. I'm just going to delete that as well. And the border colors, again, we don't need this condition for if it's an error. I just want it to be light gray all the time. So that's perfect. So you can see, let's say if we set the let's set the height to stretch with a minimum height of 0, and the width I'm going to also set it to flexible width. So it's going to go all the way with a minimum width of 0. And there we go. So that's looking pretty good. I do want to rename this. So let's do, I'm going to say txt, and it's going to be title. And we're going to, the clear, we're going to reset txt title. But I also do want to set a placeholder or the hint text. So instead of no value, I'm going to set it to starts with. So this is going to hint the user that it has to start with this. And this is just due to the delegation issues with SharePoint and being able to search certain text on some of the title fields. So yeah, we have to make it starts with that in order to avoid that. But if you have less than 500 records or less than 2,000 records, which is the limit for Power Apps, then you can do a basic search function as opposed to a starts with function. But in my case, I'm going to play it safe and just assume that I'm going to have more than 2,000 records at some point, and I'm going to stick with the starts with function. And so let's maybe select this again. Let's copy this and select our main container, paste that in, and let's go ahead and change this. So instead of title, this will be status. So we want to filter the status, and it's a choice column. So I'm gonna delete this text input. I'm gonna fix this and just delete that for now. And we're gonna go back to our screens. And again, we're just taking some of these things here. The status is right here. We've already established the design for this. So I'm just gonna copy that, go back to our component, select this container, paste it in, and let's take care of the errors here. So edit, the tooltip, I'm just going to delete. Default selected items, I'm going to set to blank as well. And this is what, when we reset it, that's what it's going to be reset to. And I'm also going to check this. And again, border color, we're going to only want to keep it light gray. And then as far as the sizing, I want it to be flexible width, height, I want it to be stretch with a minimum height of 0 and a minimum width of 0. So it's going to fit nicely within our container. And instead of find items, maybe let's change this to select. That just looks a little bit better. And then we're going to rename this. This is going to be a combo box, so CB. Status, and I'm going to set the clear to reset CB status. And so if we select something here, if we clear it, it goes back to blank. But okay, so that's good. We can now take this container, let's copy this and into this main container, let's paste it in, and let's paste it in one more time. So that's going to be one for the priority, and one of them will be for the project. So we'll be able to see all tasks that are associated with one particular project. But the combo boxes, they're all going to be the combo box. but I am going to change the items property. So the items property here is status. I don't want that. I want it to be priority. And so if we preview this, it's low, medium, and high. So that's perfect. We're going to change this to CB priority. And we're going to set this, it'll automatically adjust, which is great. And for the project, we're just going to do show columns projects, title, and ID. So we only care about the title and the ID. You can see here, it's going to list all of our projects that we've entered into SharePoint. And these are the options that I want to be able to select from. And so here they are. And then the clear button, it should reset once we change this. So it's going to be project. And yeah, this is reset CB project. So if we select something, clear it, perfect, priority, it all works. So that's really good. I think we're almost there. We just need to add a bit of a footer here where we're gonna give the user the ability to press the apply button and the reset button. So the reset will just clear everything if they don't want to just clear each thing individually. I also want to add that little separation line. So I'm gonna go ahead and select this rectangle here. I'm gonna copy it. I'm gonna select the container of the whole thing. So not just where these data cards live, but the whole thing. I'm gonna do a paste there. It's going to automatically put it at the very bottom. And so next I want to insert a container, which is going to house our buttons to reset everything and apply our selections. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a container. It will be a horizontal container. Don't want it that high. So I'm going to turn off flexible height. I want to fix that at 50. So it's going to be the same as we did up here. It's going to be 50. The minimum width will be 0. And we're going to justify to the space between. So we're going to have some space between our buttons. And we're going to set the align vertical to the center. And I'm just going to add some padding to the left and right. I'll do 10 and 10 so that the buttons aren't touching the edge. I want them to be a little bit outside of the edge to give it some white space. And then I'm going to change the border radius to 0 and drop shadow to none. So now we can go ahead and insert our buttons. We can definitely do that just by inserting a button, but we've already styled it right here. I'm going to select both of them and copy. We're going to go to components, select our bottom container there and paste it in. So there they are. I'm probably going to change them up a little bit though. So the save button is going to be apply. The height, I'm going to set it to 30, maybe 35. And the width I think is fine at 100. Maybe let's do it a little bit smaller. Let's do a 95. The onSelect property, I'm gonna clear it for now. I'll come back to that in a little bit. And then let's go ahead and do some changes to this button right here. Again, the onSelect property, I'm gonna delete it for now. We will come back to it. So the cancel, it will be instead reset. And similarly, we're going to make the height to 35, width to 95. And so now to make it functional, let's go ahead and go to the apply buttons onSelect property. Let's make this a bit bigger. And let's go ahead, we're going to do a collection. So we're going to use a collection to store our selections, and then we're going to use that collection to then filter our gallery that we're going to apply it to. So we're going to do this by clear collect. So this is going to clear the collection and then collect all of the data all over again. We're going to do bracket. We're going to do on a new line, let's call this collection COL filter task and comma. And then we're going to add a record. So we're going to do a squiggly bracket, and then we're going to do start date start. So let's call it that. And we're going to do DT start date start. And this is where the naming convention really helps. If you had just a bunch of random names, it would be very difficult for you to write this. We're going to do selected date. And then the next one will be start date end, dt start date end dot selected date. And then we're going to do the same for the due date, dt due date start, due date end, and we're going to do also for the project ID, we're going to extract our CB, our combo box, project dot selected dot ID, and then task title will be txt title dot text. Our task status will be CB status dot selected dot value, and then task priority will be CB priority dot selected dot value. And then we're gonna close off our squiggly bracket. We're gonna close off our bracket with a semicolon, and then we're going to also at the end of that set a variable var pop-up filter, which we set earlier in the video, to false. So once it applies all of these filters, we're gonna close the pop-up and see the results on our main page. So that's what it looks like here. The next thing we can do is the reset button. So the reset button, instead of clear collect, we just want to clear our collection. So this is gonna remove every single data point from our collection, and it's gonna remove the filters off of our galleries when we set it up a bit later. We also want to reset all of our selections. So again, this is where the naming conventions really help. So we're gonna reset dt start date start. We're gonna reset dt start date end, and so on. I'm just gonna go ahead and plug these in. We're gonna do the same for the due date. We have the title, so we're gonna reset txt title. We have the status, and it's the CB status. We have CB priority, and we have CB project. And after we reset all of those, we also want to do the same like we did with the apply button. We want to hide the pop-up, so we're going to set var pop-up filter to false. And so we're done with that. So this is our filter for our tasks. We can now go ahead and go over to our screens and set it up there. We'll go back to our My Tasks page. And remember this button that we created, we have on select property of set var pop-up filter to true. And so what we're gonna do is insert our custom pop-up filter task. It's automatically gonna take up our app's width, because it's the app width and the app height. And this is automatically gonna be here as well. And what we need to do though is update its visible property so that it responds to the variable var pop-up filter. So if it's true, it will be visible. If it's false, when we click the reset button, it's gonna hide it. So that's what it looks like. If we hit the play button, you can see if we hit that, it's gonna adjust to the height. If we set it to this, it's also gonna adjust. But you'll notice actually it doesn't scroll up and down. So that's something I forgot to do. We're gonna go back to our components and we're going to look for this main, not the main container, but this one here, which only contains our content. So there's a thing called horizontal and vertical overflow. In our case, we're going vertically, so we don't want it to hide, we want it to scroll. So yeah, we want to make sure to set that to scroll. And then now when we go back to our screen, let's hit that preview button. Let's change it to a much smaller one. And you can see now we can scroll all the way down. Actually, you can see when we scroll all the way down, it doesn't have any padding at the very bottom. So that doesn't look very good. I think we can fix this by going back to our component. Within this main sort of thing, we can create a container we're going to use as sort of like a manual padding, I guess. We're going to set it to minimum width 0. Flexible height will be off, and we're going to set this to maybe 20. And make sure to set the border radius to 0 and drop shadow to none. So let's see what that looks like now. If we go back and preview, there you go. So it's always going to give us some space at the bottom so it doesn't look too jam-packed at the bottom. So that's great. And so now we can go ahead basically and select a bunch of stuff, right? We want the start date to be between the 16th and let's say the 31st. Let's say the status, we only want the ones in to do. And let's go ahead and apply. And so actually it's not doing anything, and that makes sense because we haven't actually applied any filters to the gallery. So what we need to do is apply some filters to our gallery. And we're going to do it not in this main one, we're going to do it in this secondary gallery, which actually just contains a list of all our tasks. And it just arranges it based on the status of the task. But I additionally want to add a bunch of more rules here to apply what we just did from our pop-up filter task. So let's go ahead and do that. The way we're going to do this, I'm just going to format this so that it's easier to read because we're going to add a bunch of code in the bottom here. But basically, we want to add some additional conditions. So we're fine to keep all of this as is, but we want some additional conditions. And so I'm going to put this in brackets, and I'm going to do status.value. I want this to equal the first of our collection, so filter task, and I'm going to put that in bracket dot task status. So if we do this, you'll notice now that our filter was applied because I did apply that filter up here. So the start date doesn't matter right now because we haven't applied the filter. I'm just going to clear it, but we did do it for status, right? So we just updated everything on the to-do, and we can see that it's applied. If we go to in progress, we can see all of it in progress. But one thing that gets people stuck oftentimes with applying these filters is, what if we clear all the filters or just reset everything? Now nothing shows up. And that's because this condition is not true. It doesn't equal the selected status. It equals blank. So we need to fix this, and we're going to do this inside of here. So we need to do an or statement. So you can either do or you can do the two straight lines. Both of those symbolize an or condition. So I want to also make sure that if is blank, our first filter task dot task status, and close the bracket. Now you'll notice that it all showed up. So basically one of these conditions needs to be true in order for the filter to work. So if there's nothing selected in the status, then I want to show everything. And so we need to apply both of these conditions on each of the filter conditions. And the reason I'm using first is because our collection, which we can view right here, we have a collections tab. You can hit the three dots and then view table. Our filters, it's blank right now, but let me just go ahead and apply a filter so we can see something in there. So let's go back to status in progress, let's say. And if we view the table, so it's a table, right? And each of these, usually there's going to be rows of records, but in our case, there's only ever going to be one row. But Power Apps doesn't know that, so we need to tell it that just to give me the first row of your table, because there's only ever going to be one row anyways. So that's why we have to do the first in our filter there. We can now go ahead and continue this sort of logic, and let's go ahead and in a bracket, let's do the one for priority. So it's going to be very similar. So priority dot value equals first filter task dot priority, or task priority, or is blank first filter task dot priority, task priority, and then double brackets. So now we can see we have our in progress filtered, but let's say we only want to filter the high priority, so these purple ones. If we go filter and then priority, we want high, there you go. Now it's going to apply that same condition. And if we clear the priority, it'll give us all the other ones. And we can clear all of this as well. So it's working. We just need to do all the rest of them now. Let's do project ID equals first filter task dot project ID, or is blank project ID, double bracket. There you go. And so now let's go ahead and maybe do some of the dates. So the date for the start date, let's go and do start date has to be greater than or equal to the first collection of our collection start date start, or is blank and then for the end date of our start date filter, and maybe let's just copy this, it will be easier. And we're going to do start date has to be less than or equal to, and it's going to be the start date end. And here the start date end. And I'm going to copy both of these, and we're going to do the same thing for the due date. So due date, and then this one due date as well. Perfect. And I think that just leaves our title. So we're gonna do one last condition here, starts with. So that's where we're not doing the search function, we're just doing starts with in order to avoid delegation issues. So it's gonna be title, again, first of our collection, dot task title, or is blank first of our collection dot task title. And then we're going to close off the brackets. And so that's it. So that's going to make our gallery and filters work together. So let's say we're looking for this task here that says subscribe. So we're going to filter and we're going to do subscribe and then apply. There you go. It shows up. You can click on it, do whatever you need to, go back. There it is. If you want to reset the filters, you can just reset all of it. Let's say we want only the medium priorities. We can do that. We could do priority medium. There they are. If we also want to set it only to a project, so let's say enhancing customer engagement strategy, there's none for that. but let's get rid of the priority and let's just see, oh, there's just that project right there. And if we wanted to change it to a different one, we can see all of the tasks associated with that particular project. So that's all working very nicely. We want to do something similar for the projects, although we're not going to need all of the same columns. So what we can do is just maybe just create a slight variation of the one that we just created for the tasks. And let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to take this. I'm just going to go ahead and copy, or actually duplicate the component. And we're gonna wait for that to finish, and then we can rename it. It's gonna be a pop-up filter project. And so what we need to change is we'll keep the start date, we'll keep the due date. We're gonna remove the title. So the title is not necessary. That's this container here. Whoop. The status we can keep. Priority, there is no priority in this case. Project we will keep. The title, I don't know what happened there, but yeah, I'm just going to delete that. And yeah, so really we just want the status and the project. Maybe I can move the project up one. So this one, I'm going to move it above the status. And we got some errors here just because some of those columns don't exist anymore. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that and delete that. And we also want to change the collection. So the collection will be, instead of task, project. It doesn't exist right now in the reset button, but once we do make the adjustment in our apply button, it will work. So we're going to change this to project, and we're going to remove the priority and the text and delete that comma. So we're going to keep all of these same properties. The pop-up filter we can keep the same, and that's all fine and dandy. So very slight adjustments that we had to make, but we just now need to go back to our screens. We're on our project screen, and we're going to do the same thing. Maybe I'll go back to and copy this. I'm going to copy this whole container from the task screen that we created. And now I'm going to go back to our projects, and I can go ahead and paste that in here and just move it over up top here. We can then delete this project one. That just is because it's just the task label, or the project label, and we can rename this projects. And then the filter button, we're still applying that same filter, so that's all good. And then within the whole screen, we're going to insert under our custom, we're going to do pop-up filter project. There you go. It takes up the whole of our screen, and we're going to update its visible property to var pop-up filter so that it will do what it needs to there. And again, if we select this, nothing's going to work because we're not, we haven't actually applied it to our gallery. So we need to essentially do the same sort of logic. I'm just going to format the text here. We can actually even just go ahead and copy from our gallery this code that we did. We are going to make some changes so that we don't have to retype all of this again. But if we go to my project, select that gallery, and let's go ahead and paste over here. And let's go ahead and change some of these things. So the tasks, instead of tasks, it's going to be projects. That's so the table that the list that we're filtering. The status will all be the same. Instead of project ID, it's just going to be the ID column because it automatically comes with that column. So that's fine here. The title I'm going to remove because we're not filtering using that. The start dates and due dates are all fine. Priority we can delete. And status we can keep. And everything else is good. Although I do need to change everywhere that it says task. I need to change it to project. So one way to do this very quickly, I've done a sort of like a short video on this, but if you highlight the word that you want to change everywhere, and then you do Command Shift L, or I believe, yeah, Control Shift L on Windows, it'll now highlight all of the instances of that particular highlighted task. So we're going to delete this, and I'm just going to type project. And you can see it updated everywhere. There seems to be an issue with the project status. So I'm just going to go ahead and check out what that is. It's probably in our apply here. Oh yes, so we didn't change the task status to project status. So we want to go ahead and do that. There we go. So that should take care of that error. Perfect. And so let's go ahead and test this out. We click the filter, and let's say the project we want process efficiency improvement. Let's apply. There it is. We can clear and maybe select digital transformation instead. Great. The status, yes, we want to actually change this as well. If we go back to components, the status will not be from the task status, but it will be from the project status, which is only going to be in progress or completed. So everything else, all the logic will still be the same, but just the choices that we select, we needed to update. So here we go. You'll see all the ones in progress and all the ones completed. Perfect. Everything works as expected. And let's say we only want to see projects that started in August. I can see quickly that these two started in August 27th, August 21st. And let's say we want the start date to be, let's say from August 1st to August 31st. And we can apply. And now you can see those two are filtered accordingly. And we can just reset all of the filters. And so that's it. Hope that was helpful. Let me know if it does help your project or if you're planning to use it in your apps. I would love to hear some of the use cases that you have. I just want to make sure that I'm providing you guys value. So let me know in the comments where you think we should take this app going forward. I have some ideas, but definitely would love to hear your opinion on what you would want to see in the upcoming videos. I do want to keep on building on this and applying different strategies on different visual effects or just different functions in general. So yeah, let me know what you guys want to see, and I look forward to continuing to build this. And I'll see you in the next one.